already joined New Code, or maybe this is your first event, introducing the two leadership fellows. We have Mansi, who's leadership fellow Women Who Code Data Science, and I am Eliza Sarobhasa, short for Elizabeth, leadership fellow at Women Who Code Python.
Hi everyone, very nice to have you here. And if you're joining Bytes and Brew for the first time, welcome. But if you've been a regular attendee of this concept, we're trying something new this time. So instead of this being an informal meeting, where we saw that the discussion was a little slow because some people might be intimidated to turn on their cameras or unmute themselves, we're having this as a webinar format as our other sessions so that we can offer you more guidance, more structured concepts, and maybe more help. And this is something that people from all track communities can join, because we're offering help with soft skills and career prep and interviews, which everyone at every career path can choose to learn. So we're very excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
I just want to add, it's totally Mansi spearheading this awesome, great idea, make it more collaborative, saying how can we help the community? How can we help our volunteers and attendees, with the current job climate. So Mansi, thank you so much for suggesting this new event format.
Definitely. Thank you so much for helping. So we have a wonderful speakers who've been active members of the community, both communities. And first we have Lindsey. She is the track lead of the data science track. Bisi, she is a data science volunteer. Nayeon, she is a Python track lead. Aranyah is a Python track volunteer, and Victoria here is a data science track volunteer. All of them have great experience in their respective fields, and they're here to offer you some of their wisdom, their experiences. And it will be an interactive session. The chat and Q&A boxes are open throughout the session. So if you have any question regarding the event content, you can ask in the Q&A box. But if you have any other general questions regarding any of the track or about the Women Who Code community, you can just ask in the Zoom chat. So over to you, all the speakers. I hope you all have a great time.
So for our first session, I think what we discussed when brainstorming, we were focused on career prep, in the interview, technical questions, red flags, and follow-up. But for the first topic, we're going to focus on career prep. So this is kind of you've already submitted your resume, and you get a call or email back from the recruiter saying, oh, we want to invite you for an interview. And my first impression is oh no, now I got to prep for the interview. Yeah, so does any of our speakers want to take a stab at what they recommend for suggestions when they have to career prep for their interviews?
Sure. I can go ahead and kick it off, and if anyone can, feel free to hop in on the conversation. If you've been contacted by a recruiter, congratulations. It must mean that you've done a really good job of presenting yourself online and through your resume. Perhaps you've done some good networking and you've gotten a referral. Whatever your avenue was, you've been contacted by a recruiter, you've gotten an interview, and now it's time to prepare. So first steps I would say is that you need to start researching the company and get really familiar, not only with the job description front and, from top to bottom, every single aspect of that job description, knowing it intimately, but also the company and of course the core values and the core mission of the company, as well as the business model. That's a good place to start. And then kind of trying to reverse engineer all that down to what your main contribution will be in the role there as you start preparing for your interview. Some other good keys, tips would be to get to know the clients and any projects that the team you'd be joining is working on. Some ways you can do that are reaching out to people on LinkedIn who have a similar role at the company or who are kind of adjacent to the role you would be in the company, if anyone is willing to discuss anything that they're working on, if they can, or anything they can offer you as far as information that would help prepare you for an interview. Does anyone else want to add anything to that as far as maybe dissecting the job description?
I'd love to jump in. I can share my previous experiences with the kind of questions I have, because then just as you said, doing that pre-interview prep, you're researching the company, trying to see what their mission is. honestly go on their Twitter feeds, go on their LinkedIn, see what kind of articles they're posting and what projects they're working on that are in the news that you can bring up in your interview. I want to highlight two formats of answering a question that has helped me kind of prepare, because you always hear people say, run through your answers, almost to the point where it's like off the top, but at the same time, you want to balance not sounding like a robot. And just having these two templates that I'm about to say, you can kind of learn to just be able to recall any example you have, adapt it to this template so that you can make it sound more fluid when you're on a Zoom call, when you're on a phone call. I know you've probably heard, I want to hear in the chat, have you guys heard of behavioral questions and situational questions, where these are the killer ones? And I have been stuck, sitting on the spot going, okay, this is my time to shine, but am I ready? We will go over behavioral questions first. These ones are designed to kind of see how you've performed in the past and determine if what you say is a good indicator of how you're going to perform in the future. They might start with phrases like, tell me about a time when you do this, describe a situation when you've done X, Y, Z, give me an example of. And if you've heard of the STARS format, let me know. It stands for situation, task, action, result, and summary. So when they say, tell me an example when you had to take initiative in XYZ, you can start by elaborating on the situation and setting up the context for your story. Remember, this HR professional has no idea what your previous company or role was like, and you're going to have to set the stage in terms of highlighting exactly what you did. Don't assume that they know anything about, don't use abbreviations that you might not be sure they know of. Set that context and then move into the task phase, where you elaborate on what's required of you. A lot of times you'll, hear candidates say how my team was responsible for this, this is how it would have resulted in. But as an HR, you're wondering, okay, that's what I know, what your team has accomplished. I want to know exactly what you've done in this role that made you stand out and how you took initiative. Now we're going to transition to action so that you can specifically say what you did and why. This is where you can show if you took an initiative to go above and beyond, and show, this is how your transferable skills can work into play here. If you're like me, you end up starting to babble on at this point. So you want to make sure that you're ending off strong. When you get into the R, which is the result phase, you say, what happened? Was it good? Was it bad? Can you quantify the result? It doesn't have to be that, you launched this startup from scratch and you went to $1 million profit in the first month and you're flying colors over here. You could talk about situations that weren't exactly, you weren't rock star moments, and you had to, mitigate through these issues to, see if there was some feedback you can get from it. Again, if you're a babbler like me, you got to summarize at the end so that you can say, did you learn anything? Was there a strength you possess that was highlighted in this story? And how is it relevant to the job? If you kind of see that you're starting to stretch this answer a bit, make sure to highlight specific things in the job description that Lindsey was talking about, and how they can now put two and two, put the puzzle pieces together to see, all right, yeah, no, I can definitely visualize this person. You're also trying to show them that even if you haven't necessarily done the exact role before, you not only have a good transferable skills, but you are a great team player. They like your attitude, they like your vibe. Now, the situational questions is when they're actually asking you, okay, imagine if I were to put you in this scenario, your manager has just put you on a project that's due in 2 hours and you don't have all the details ready to accomplish said task. This is where you're going to hit them up with the RACED technique, RACED. You're going to restate the statement, repeat the situation back to them briefly. This is kind of a hint where people can, use that 2 seconds to repeat the question and also think of an answer. You have full reign to tell the HR professional, do you mind giving me, a few seconds to think? Or I've seen some people who have brought a pad and paper and they can kind of jot their thoughts down. Use this to your advantage. If you feel like you've really got stumped by the question, reorganize your thoughts and imagine yourself in the scenario. Then transition to analyze. What's the dilemma here? Talk about both sides if you see them. Highlight what the stakeholders are, who's involved, what, who's the person who's going to get most, angry if this scenario doesn't play out well. Then you get to the cause and outcome. State possible causes of the situation, best case scenario, worst case scenario. Part of these answers is showing that you can think critically of the scenario rather than just looking at the answer itself. Make assumptions if necessary, and also tell them what your assumptions are. What would be the outcome for picking one side over the other in the dilemma, and think about the impacts to you, yourself, and the people involved. This is also when you can then move into experience, where you can highlight similar experiences that show the qualities you possess. And you can then talk about the STARS format, but making sure that it's a topic that you can elaborate on. How to prepare for technical issues and post-interview tips, and then make sure you have a decision at the end that says why you did the possible actions.
It's great. I just want to do a great segue. You're saying like understanding the problems they're trying to solve, how you're the person like going and solving. I know Nayeon, you contributed a lot of information how to like learn more about the company. Would you like to share about that?
Sure. So I think basically, if you think about like the reason why we apply to jobs, it's actually like to make a living and to survive, right? But companies want people who are genuinely interested in them. So this means that like you definitely need to do a lot of research about the company, like what their mission and their values are, and also like what kind of work they do, or even like some projects the company has been doing. And for me, I think to research about the companies I was interviewing for, I first looked up their Wikipedia pages in case I wasn't so familiar with them. And then what I did was that, so if it is a tech company, then by a good chance they have a technical blog. And I already knew what team I would be interviewing with. And I Googled the team name along with the company name, and I found out the particular page dedicated to the team's blog entries. There were not many like blog articles on that page. If I remember, it was like just 2 articles. So I decided to just like read all of them. And the articles were about like machine learning, which I have like no experience with. But then I still try to like understand as much as possible, like given my skills. And companies like know that like they are not striving to recruit like the best like perfect candidate in the world. They know that like we're all like human and we all have like limitations. So what I did was that I mentioned the particular article I read on their blog page, and then I showed my interest of something like by saying, oh, I learned about this in my linear algebra class, and it was so interesting to learn about like how this concept can be applied in the field of machine learning. And the interviewer was kind of like impressed because it kind of like set me apart from other candidates, because just by just by doing like a little more than required, you can really show that like you're genuinely interested in the company and you want to just go like the extra mile to really like show that like you're passionate about your work and also the company.
I think that's great. Thank you so much. And yeah, in addition, like, you look about the company and like what problems they're trying to solve. How does your role go into like helping solve that problem? Understanding like, is this a new role that's like, that's being created, or is this like something that's already existing that they've been doing for a while? Mansi, and you, I know you recently prepped for an interview.
So one main challenge I had to face was I first worked in India and now I'm in Australia. So you have to make sure that your resume and cover letter and all the other documents are in the correct format. So make sure you update those. All universities, if you are a student, all universities provide those services. And second was tailoring your resume to match the job descriptions. That's more, obviously your work will become a little more, like your process will become a little more longer, and I mean, good things don't come easy, so you have to like put in the work there. And as also Nayeon also mentioned and Aranyah also mentioned, do your research due diligence before applying for the company. So this was a real estate company. I have no idea. I've never myself bought real estate or invested in one. It's just like an extension of how, like just where I live. It's just that. So they do not expect you to be a master in the subject matter, because no, like a person, a recent graduate who's just pursuing masters would not know things about real estate, but they would want you to understand that you are there to put in the work. So that should reflect in your answers, or like trying to approach a solution when they're asking a question. So they'll not ask you questions that you know, they'll ask you questions that they're dealing with and how you might approach the first week, like how would you approach those problems in the first month at work. So you giving, I was just asked, you giving property transactions data, what you will do with. I said I'll like to know the source of the data first. So how much time would I want to put in cleaning that data? Because 85% of our jobs is just cleaning the data. We don't do fancy machine learning every day. We deal with data sources, data engineers. We scream at them, we shout at them that we need better data. So that's what we do on a regular basis. So they just want to know that you know how to solve problems, maybe be a little more creative, and don't be afraid to like think on the spot. You can take like I just said that okay, English is not my first language. I forgot the English word for something. I said, oh, I missed that. I don't know what's the English for that. So because that is something anecdotal, like that is something like we were discussing something anecdotal about some work experience, and I thought I usually say that in Hindi with my colleagues, so I don't remember that word for that. So be honest. I think people like that because they would want to hire someone who is not stuck in their desk all the time. They would want to have a conversation with you during lunch, maybe after work or on weekends, probably, like if you have team members like that. So be more honest and authentic about yourself. Don't pretend that you know everything, because no one does. My manager doesn't know everything either, and he's very honest about it.
All right, just recognizing people, how do
Yeah.
they think to solve problems, so they can see what
Exactly.
you're like on the job, and like you're hiring someone to join the team, culture fit. So yeah, these are
Right.
great points. Thank you. Victoria or Bisi, did you also want to add any points?
Yes, I remember the last month I applied for a job in a different sector. For example, I'm actually in in banking, in financial, in some tasks, for example, credit risk or innovation. Sometimes I'm afraid about how can how can adapt myself to that job, and then I need to update my CV for 40 times. I don't know, but I think it's necessary to search what is the abilities or technical skills, the standard, and then you can adapt you in every sectors. And also it's important to have passion for the problem that you need to solve, from, for example, using Python or using Tableau or any tools. Because when you sit in your laptop, start your day cleaning data or create your model, you need to focus on what kind of problem you need to solve. That is the important, I don't know, is the motivation to search jobs that you can fit with that, right? Because okay, if it's your first job, try to learn. It's important. Is if you feel afraid, it's okay, but it's a process, right? I think it's not that be a data scientist, because every job have a different requirements. It's literally what objective or what activities you enjoy be a data scientist. So yes, that is my reflection for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. Bisi, would you like to go next on this topic?
Yeah. I just wanted to add that, we're talking about tailoring your CV to suit the role. And right now we have several, I know a couple of people have challenges tailoring CVs, tailoring their resumes in line with the job description. I just wanted to mention that we have some AI tools available today that can actually help in generating resumes, or generating resumes in line with the job description. So all you need to do is get the job description and put it in the tool and request for request for a CV tailored in line with that job description. So it would, to a very large extent, reduce the trouble in having that CV tailored into the job description. So it's interesting because we have tools today that can actually help resolve a couple of the troubles that used to happen, or we used to have before now. So yeah, the tools are available at our beck and call, and always use them. Just wanted to add that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bisi. I guess another thing I point out, in addition to like all these great tips all the speakers have provided preparing for interviews, I also like to reach out for like cultural knowledge in like casual interviews that are not scheduled, with people who may know through a friend of a friend who's already working on the team, or is like someone who also does public speaking for the company, to say what is the culture like, what kind of like projects are you focused on, like outside of work thing, and like what kind of things is the company trying to solve. So it's like it's like casual conversation, but it's not like interview phase, but you just want to understand like what it's like for people who are already working there, and like what is the company trying to like do. Are they a startup, right, where they just got a lot of funding and they're able to like grow more, or are they a larger company, and they're just going through like, it's like like Mansi, the digital like transformation, right? They're trying to do more things with their data, trying to be more trying to make it more clean, understand like points they can do and like upcoming projects that like may be coming up. So yeah, it's all great. And also if it's an in-person interview, like look up on a map how long it takes to get there. And just like planning, just like your outfit, right? Like obviously like with Zoom, like we're all very casual, but we still have to like dress up, just a little bit for interviews, and like choosing our backdrop, choosing the lighting, right? And I think discuss these few things. So yeah, and okay, I guess the next topic would be in the interview questions. I know that Aranyah, you've discussed like elevator pitch, behavioral star examples. Maybe I can hand this back to Lindsey. You can discuss like if it's you're doing career transition and like speaking to those skills and experience.
Sure. Yeah, just to piggyback off of our earlier discussion on the stars examples, something to prepare for ahead of time is to go through that job description, as I mentioned, kind of break it down, and for each bullet point and the responsibilities and expectations of the job, kind of prepare a star example ahead of time that relates to that job. And especially if you're career transitioning, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you can prove to them that you can do this new job, this new transition, if you don't have the work experience already. So ahead of time, get those star examples outlined and practice them, so that when a specific question comes up, that you have a bank to kind of go to pull that answer that's relevant to that question being asked. Of course, past job experiences that could relate, find a connection somehow. There's very creative ways about doing this. You can almost find a transferable skill in anything that you do. And if you're struggling with that, reach out to someone in the Women in Code community, and we can kind of help you brainstorm that. That's something that we've all run into. I'm sure we've all done transitions of one kind or another in our career journey. So definitely don't be afraid to branch out. Along the lines of that too, we're going to want to have a little elevator pitch of some sort, because like one of the questions I see in the Q&A here is the tell me about yourself, right? This should be a very natural answer. It shouldn't be rehearsed, but it should definitely make sure that you put in all of your sales pitch points about yourself in there. Do they want to know your entire history that's not relevant to your job? No, probably not. But do you want to show your authenticity and who you are personality wise? Absolutely. So the best thing to do with this is to practice in a mock interview. Have that elevator pitch, have someone kind of help you hone in on the important aspects of it. And once again, to make sure you're hitting key points of the job description within that story that you're telling about your career journey. And it should be a very specific career journey story. So, you know, they don't need to hear your whole family life background. It gets easy to ramble in these types of open-ended questions, but what they're trying to assess is how you've kind of managed your career, how you've managed your life. And also, you know, if you're able to succinctly summarize that information, and if you're able to stay kind of within your train of thought and relevant to the task at hand. It's a problem solving skill as well. So does anyone else kind of want to take it from there? You know, I think I mentioned, if I didn't, recording yourself is also a fantastic tool. Many of us don't like to see ourselves recorded, but it's actually very helpful. And if you can get past that, watching yourself be recorded, you'll perform much better in an interview.
I definitely done that once.
And embrace your inner, like, you know,
Yeah.
theater star on stage.
Definitely.
Pay attention to your like non-verbal actions too when you watch yourself on a video. How many times do you say like? And I like how she said that when you say tell about yourself, definitely include like some aspect of personable touch. And that way if you do end the interview a lot early just because you're on a good vibe, that having that personal touch at the beginning gives the interviewer a reason to like start chatting with you on a more personal level, and then you can get to know them better and you stand out this way.
And also remember, like, you're also interviewing the company too, to see what they're like, what the team is like. And, I say it's just, just say yes to every interview. It's just like, it's good interview practice. And, sometimes they've got like maybe 5 really great candidates for a role, but the budget only allows them to hire 1. But if you just make good impression, they keep you in mind. It's like, oh, we had more funding, like come up for another role or something similar. You're at the forefront of their mind. Yeah, maybe I could hand it over to Nayeon. I know you had some great suggestions during planning about, how do you present yourself to collaborate as a team player?
Yeah, I think you will get asked this common question, like that's about like how you have resolved like a conflict working with people online, for example. And I think in this case, I definitely stick to like the STARS method to explain to clearly explain what the situations and what my tasks were. And I think what my interviewers valued was that they kind of like ask if I did anything beyond just like formal meetings to personally connect with my colleagues, because at the end of the day, we are all like, I mean, like all of them are colleagues, but we are also like friends in a way. And if you can show that like you're a community builder and you're like interested in like personally connecting with your colleagues, then you can you maybe bring up like one episode where maybe you can, I think for example, I had like a coffee chat, like informal coffee chats with my teammates because I just wanted to like get to know better about themselves. And also I didn't get to like see them in person. I still haven't like meet the people I worked with last summer, but still like by conducting some like coffee chats, I got to know about like their personal life, and we became like closer colleagues. And by mentioning a story like this, I show that like I'm just not like a working robot. I'm genuinely interested in becoming a team member and working towards the shared common goals.
That's great. Yeah, I know it's like a lot of questions. The standard ones are like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What would you do in this situation? Tell me about yourself and like certain projects. But yeah, I'm wondering, like, maybe we could also like next topic we could go on is like, discussing like the room or like, your Zoom layout setup. Like, we can do an interview in Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or in like the Zoom video. Did anyone else speakers want to volunteer how they share, how they get set up?
Set up for questions such as weaknesses, those ones we all hate. Is that what we're referring to?
I guess like how do you like set up your space for the room? But yeah, if you want to discuss like strengths and weaknesses, but we already touched on those for like the STAR method, but it's up to you.
Oh yeah, getting set up too. I think another good point is to, are we talking about virtual interviews, the space for a virtual interview? Yeah, so one thing I found is a really good tip that kind of helps the psychology of the interviewer seeing you in a better light, and no pun intended, is to have really good lighting so that you can, make sure that you kind of just illuminate in the screen. It can be very impersonal sometimes, and it's very hard to kind of get to know someone and see their full body language. So you want to make sure you're not directly up on the screen, back up a little bit so you can see your body language, have really good ample lighting. Make sure to emphasize smiling and all of those subtle body cues and body languages that kind of insinuate that you are an easygoing person that can get along with others, and you're comfortable in your environment, you're comfortable in your situation. That makes the interviewer comfortable, more comfortable as well, and will likely get you to stand out and be noticed and remembered. And then also, I think I mentioned weaknesses, the question we all hate. There is an easy way to address this. I think the best thing to do in approaching a question like that is to have a situation lined up, not directly related to your core responsibilities. The idea here is that you don't want to correlate any negative situations or probing questions about challenges or issues you might have faced to any of the job related core responsibilities you'll be handling. The best way to do that is to find something not directly related, but relevant that you have created an action item for, or have already actively worked on correcting, that you have an ability to respond to, or to kind of have a resolution for. Yeah, so I think, having those prepared are very important. And this is actually an opportunity to highlight your personality as well, because there isn't one of us that doesn't have a weakness of some sort. Some people might have, distractibility when it comes to having too many scope, too large of a scope, and you can talk about what you've done to help you prioritize. It can be many things like that, but what I would do is try to take a situation that isn't related to a core responsibility, but end on a positive note, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I know personally, I used to be very shy with public speaking. I did not like to. I would hide in the back of the room, still get good grades. But I wouldn't be proactive answering questions in class, or just when attending events. But I started volunteering. I put myself out there. I attended Toastmasters so I could practice speaking and build up the knowledge base and being comfortable speaking to people. And also if you improv groups in your city, those are fun too, because you're just being very silly and extroverted, and it's it's just a conversation between you and the other person to share knowledge. So yeah, do anyone else want to add points on this topic?
Yeah. It's also part of things that would make for a good interview session has to do with your room setup. Lindsey had mentioned some of the room setup. Also your Zoom settings in terms of your background, your if you need to blur, if you have different options actually. It's either you do a blur or you pick a virtual background, just something that depicts not something that depicts an official setting will be fine. Doesn't have to be a seashore or a seaside view at the background. It doesn't come out, it doesn't turn up well. So a good background will be fine with enough lighting. It's also good to have appropriate dressing. You should be appropriately dressed for a Zoom interview, an online interview. Just like you would not want to go for an interview, an in-person interview in your pajamas. You shouldn't, be in your pajamas on an interview call. So
Well, it might be a pajama
Um,
company. You may never know that, right, Bisi?
well, sure, but it's better to play safe than get on the wrong side of the interviewer. Get so a few things also is ensure that arrive early before the interview session. So I've seen a couple of times where people get in. It's better to actually be on the Zoom call and find out that the host is yet to start the meeting than come in after the host has started the meeting. It leaves a bad a negative impression, actually. I know that there are times that there might be some eventualities where things are beyond your control, you couldn't, but as much as possible 10 minutes before the time, it doesn't cost anything. Get into the Zoom meeting and get ready for the interview just in time for the event to start. So these are some of the things I feel should also be in place as well in preparing for an interview.
That's great. Yeah, I know it was in-person interview, we'd show up maybe a few minutes earlier for like the event, meet with them and like view what the office like, view what other people are dressing. But yeah, with Zoom, it's a little bit different. I think we were discussing, we were planning sessions, like, just add a little bit of lipstick, right? Just to make that little extra color pop. And just like I've seen like all this stuff like different like Zoom or like different types of backgrounds. Mine's from Pinterest. But yeah, just like show your personality. But it's, to be fair, I think also Nine, you mentioned too some things you did with your Zoom background with the companies you interviewed with. Do you want to add that point?
Yeah, sure. So so if you actually Google the company name and then maybe like with this keyword Zoom background or Google Meet background, then you might see like some results on Google posted by the company's like marketing group. Like some companies like share like their company themed backgrounds on the internet, so you can like download them and then set it as your background. Then it can like it's nothing like difficult to do, but it really shows that like you try to like go above and beyond, even if it was just like setting the background and to match like with the company.
That's great. Thank you so much. Nancy, do you want to add any points about, I know you're Australia, so you have like all the sunshine. Do you choose like, time of day or where you are in the room for your good lighting? I have a tripod, but.
I actually like right now I chose the room facing the like adjacent to the window, so I have direct sunlight. Otherwise, if it's nighttime, which it usually is, I always switch on my room light, and I changed the bulb as well because I did not like the previous lighting. So it's a warm yellow light, so that's not like a dingy hospital white light as well.
It's all
Yeah.
recognizing some people, they've like, it's like push the pets out of the room. I think we've all seen like that video where like, the kids are dancing into the room, all the dads like broadcasting. I think it's like the 6th year anniversary of that video. It's my favorite. Yeah, and just recognizing that. Also, sometimes like there's technical glitches that happen. I've had an experience where like I had to chat with someone over MS Teams, but because the app I downloaded, it was just like glitching with my computer. So I've had to figure out like, the video just going flicker on, flicker off, flicker on. So it's fun to watch, but it's not good for an interview. So I had to use the desktop, the web app instead to conduct the meeting. And I believe for some events, if the audio is not working or connecting, then you can also just use the voice by phone, right? Because like stuff happens. We're like in a pandemic and we'll have like technical glitches for doing it from home. So I hope people like more understanding of all the other things that you work on during the interview prep. I see Aranyah has her hand up.
Yes, I wanted to tackle one of the questions about, okay, you got a quiet interview, it feels a bit stale now. And it's like, at that point, we're just like, hey, do I salvage this or do I just scrap this as one of those interviews? Yeah, I just use as feedback. And I kind of personally see it as going 3 ways. You can either ask the interviewer, say, are there any pain points you would have the candidate tackle once they're in the role? So then you can get them to start talking about the actual, like, all right, what do they want them specifically for this company, you know, to do outside of just what the job description. You can see kind of an insight of what active projects they're doing, or you can take it second way of like, start just interviewing your interviewer and say, you know, what are exciting projects you're taking on right now? I'd love to hear about what you're doing. And that way you can kind of see like, oh, look, these are things you can take initiative once you're in this company. Third way, this is a very daring attribute, but I still say, hey, do it out there. You can ask the interview and say, are there any areas of doubt you have when looking through my resume, CV, or even this interview, and having it come in a very genuine way so they can say like, yeah, actually, you hit all these requirements except for this one thing. And then you can use that to say, actually, yeah, no, I didn't get to touch on this during the interview. I love to use a few seconds to maybe show like, hey, I do have this experience that would help me, or this is why I have the willingness to learn and why I would still be a good fit. You can kind of save yourself. Worst case scenario, you scrap this as an interview that just happens to be one of those really good personality tests or, you know, practice.
That's great. Thank you so much. So next topics we'll be doing is one, kind of understanding like point of view of like the hiring manager, maybe the team member you're interviewing with, and then we'll like dig into the nitty gritty of like our favorite technical questions and like discussing projects. I know it's one because I had like sometimes I have to slow down, repeat myself because like the interview just can't keep up with like all the notes that they're writing. Like I write stuff by hand during interviews, so you don't have to hear my keyboard. But I'm just like wondering what else maybe the team anyone can suggest about, yeah, just like, you know, what keep in mind like for the interviewer, like what are you asking them to learn more about like the company or themselves? Because like this person's gonna be your boss, you're gonna talk with them like I don't know how often, maybe every day. So, oh, I see Lindsey has her hand up.
And that's a great segue into keeping an eye open for red flags. This is also a two-way street, right? We've mentioned that before, that you're interviewing the company as well. You know, you're in a position where you want to be a good fit for them, but they need to be a good fit for you as well, for you to get the job satisfaction and, you know, the ultimate success of your role. So some things to keep in mind are when you're doing your interview, you're going to want to try to strategically place questions in there when it's your turn to ask questions that let you probe the culture a little more than what they've offered you, and let you find out what the work environment is like, what their cadence is like, things that related to scope of work. Some red flags to keep in mind is that you might want to think about the whole process as you go through. How has it been? How have you been treated by all the people that have interviewed you? Is the process hasty or is it overdrawn out? One way or the other, either of those extremes could be a red flag. If it's too hasty, there might be a situation where you find yourself in a job that you might not be prepared for, or that might be completely out of your scope of work or your expertise area. If you find a job that's very long and drawn out, it might mean that they are kind of teasing you along and they have many applicants and many candidates, and you might not be at the top of the list, but they want to kind of just dangle you along, or that, you know, they might not respect your time if they ask you to do an inordinate amount of technical interviews or you know, rounds. Of course, it's common to have many rounds, but at what point do they are they showing that they're respecting your time, that you have a current responsibilities, some things of that nature. What kinds of questions are being asked about you? Are they appropriate questions? Are they too probing about your personal preferences in your personal life? Some of that conversation is very healthy and good to kind of create a relationship and to find out more about each other, but there's certain things that draw the line. You know, are they asking questions that are illegal in the area that you work? You know your laws about employment. And then what supports are in place? I think if they are able to answer that question very clearly, that you can feel that you will have the support you need to succeed. Does anyone else want to jump in there about red flags they might have experienced in the past? Or
Yes.
If we can
Sorry.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay. I have experience when I was applying for a job who is more for business analytics with data scientists. But when I try to or doing the practical test, it was more for cleaning and engineering tasks. So then I went to it's important, like Lindsey said, checks the requirements are if it's the activities or your role is the same to when you enter to the company, because it's not that you stop your career, but it's necessary to you follow your dreams, your purpose, your objective to learn your what kind of job you are applying. So I recommend you to check in LinkedIn what your future coworkers, what activities they do, and also if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't feel comfortable with some activities in the process, or you feel some they'll tell you some ambiguous questions, it's important to you have very clear what activity you're willing to do to prevent these red flags. I remember also other interview that I was using my camera and talk in from that, and the interviewer was watching another computer in the another screen, and he didn't listen watch me. So was very strange because okay, I didn't want to work in this in that way. So yeah, it's important to respect you, follow the correct environment for you. Is it in remotely or is in person? Research about that for the culture. It's important to in this process learn more about yourself, have your objective very clear, and then prevent that kind of red flags.
That's great. Thank you so much, Victoria. I know also Glassdoor shares people will post reviews, but understand grain of salt. It's always like angry reviews, they're very happy reviews. So sales interview. I guess like one thing I can bring up, some people try to like post scams, like they pretend to work for the company, right? But they're not actually a recruiter there. Even they might have similar email addresses, or they ask you to send your banking info things, so they can send you stuff, but like they're just doing that like so when they receive money bank account, that it's like it doesn't actually go through. But it's just like these are just kind of like scam or red flag things, like I guess to be aware of. Yeah, and okay, so go to the next topic, which was when we're talking with the hiring manager, recognize like you have to slow down because they're taking like notes during the interview, like how you're answering questions, whether it's the recruiter or hiring manager, so when they compare you to other candidates. Did anyone else want to share questions they have for the hiring manager or team members? Okay, I see Nayeon's hand up, and then afterwards we'll hand it over to Lindsey if that's okay.
Okay, can I go? There's this question that I always ask hiring managers that interview me, which is that I ask, how would you ensure the psychological safety of your teammates? Because I think like ensuring the psychological safety of teammates is one of the biggest and crucial responsibilities of a hiring manager, because as a teammate, if you don't really feel like it is safe enough to like express your opinions, or you feel like threatened, or you don't feel like safe enough to participate in like group work, then you'll get stressed all the time, and it's not the kind of workplace you want to be in. So the hiring manager should be responsible for this and should have a strategic answer to your question. And if you find the hiring manager not really like answering this question well, then I think that is also a red flag.
Okay. I guess the question I have on top of here, I mentioned, what was the team like, when it started, like when you started growing this team in the company, or like, what is everyone's, different like collaboration or working styles like? I know we mentioned Victoria too, like sometimes some roles they want to be very collaborative, you talk to a lot of people, different teams, and other type of roles you have to like, figure it out on your own and like dig in and get all the info. Because maybe it's a startup, right? They're still building all of that stuff from the ground up. And they don't have like a set process in place like a larger company. Does anyone else want to add? If not, then we can go on to more technical questions. Like huge page. So I know one of them asking like product specific questions for the company. I'm it's understanding like, what the company's like, it's a software as a service. Is it like, products that'll be like software or like, actual physical product?
So in terms of during the interview, it's a good practice to actually ask what products or what services, okay, so part of the thing you've done is you've done your background check, you've seen what their products are, what services they offer, and during the interview session you should be able to mention some of the things they've done, some of their products, some of their services. However, it's also good to ask what's the product development process like. It's so some people actually still do somewhat the waterfall. People still go through the waterfall model in in building their products and their software products, their digital products and all. But it would be nice to you need to know where the company stands, what their process is like. Do they use waterfall or do they use agile? Are they quick to respond to customers' requests, or rather they would take they take their time, in getting new requests and new features out. It's actually good practice to get that detail from them, because it goes a long way to determine what you, as the technical person, or as in your role in the technical role, what you'll be doing and how you'll be able to support the team in rolling out these features and rolling out their services, their products as it were. Another thing is actually it's good practice to ask what's the structure like. So if you're coming from the product angle, what's the structure like? What's the team? What's the team size? What's the team size? How do they are they co-located in the same area or the same time zone? If it's a remote role, are they are they all within the same time zones, or would you be collaborating with people or team members across different team zones? It's actually good to get that detail as well during the interview process. It's also good to make ask questions. What's the growth plan? What's the growth plan for me? What's the plan from this role? Will I transition? How long will it take me to transition to the next role? Do we have someone in that role currently? Do you have someone in that role at the moment, or is that role vacant? And how long will it take me to get into that role? These are some of the questions that one should ask during that interview session. It's actually good because it gives you a good idea of what you'll be getting into, and how you'll be able to support the team. So I think that's pretty much. And then in terms of their quality, what's the quality, their quality culture? So I've worked in companies where for some reason they don't have the quality culture. It's interesting because it leads to a whole lot of
Legacy data.
losses to the company. Yeah. Legacy data gets
technical debt.
Exactly. It gets exposed. It leads to loss when it comes to the organization. The organization runs into loss because projects fail. You get issues in production, and customers already get dissatisfied. You get dissatisfied customers because the products are not of, they're not quality. They don't have the required quality. So it's good to actually get also a sense of their quality culture. How do they manage quality? What's the quality management structure? That form of information is also very good, and would help in the interview session.
I also want to add, like, yeah, if it's waterfall versus agile, these are like project management terms. Waterfall, goes like step, 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 step. Agile is like we're building the boat as like, we're moving along. And just like, how are we tracking all the bugs, how are we helping like, the new person coming in, like to ramp up with all like the code and like technical documentation, so on, or does it live it like in someone's brain? So recognizing those, and so I think we've all had that experience, like, the hardest part of any job is like of coding is like debugging your own code. So just recognizing just, what's their like coding style, what kind of like notes do we write to in the company software to track like what we've done and like what happened in like this situation. But yeah, and also, yeah, I think it's great, like, the product, like, is the company trying to sell like something is like ML? Is it like, is it with blockchain? Is it with like, housing data? Is it like legacy data, like banks, or it's maybe, food delivery data? Like what is it that's like, driving all of the software? Yeah. And then, so I guess that's a good segue. We'll ask, next topics like analysts, and then wrap up with Python, SQL, and open source. So analyst.
Sure.
Is
I
that
can
you,
talk about
Lindsey?
that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So there are probably a great many roles that we're all here for, interested about. So we'll kind of cover some of these briefly, and then we can go into detail in the next session if you like, or offline or through Slack. Basically, when you're going for an analyst job, you want to make sure that you can apply past analytical skills or abilities. So we've all analyzed things, whether or not you know it. You've been an analyst at some point in your life if you've problem solved. Find a time when you have put those skills to use, whether or not they're actually technical or not. They are an analytical ability. Don't rule anything out. But of course, if you have past technical analytical skills, definitely highlight that. Some things that people are very interested in with an analytics role is SQL, visualization, a business intelligence tool like Tableau or Power BI, things like that. But don't forget to leverage your past experiences in those technical questions. You should also be pretty familiar with stats. You don't have to be an expert, but definitely know the basics. I would just pick up a quick book, or refresh yourself on a quick course. That would be a good use of your time. Something very important is to develop a business acumen. Do you know the lingo? Do you know the initiatives and the objectives of the business? And do you know what the main goals are as far as financial analysis goes, and the bottom line, and all these terminologies and concepts that are really important to driving a business forward. That's something you're going to need to have an understanding of as an analyst in any capacity. And develop a domain or a niche or an SME, the subject matter expertise in something related to the business. And if you have a domain or a niche that you're comfortable with in analysis, there's a lot of jobs out there that can parlay into. Work on a personal portfolio. This is always good for any role. Make sure that you can showcase some visualization in there as well, and some key results that would be interesting to a business stakeholder. And that's my final point would be learning to translate the needs of a stakeholder and anticipate the needs of a stakeholder. So what excites them? What makes them happy? What are the results they want to see? Of course, we don't want to manipulate the data, but we want to understand what makes them tick and what information they're after that helps them create the success and the results they want. So whether it's a negative result or a positive result, is it something they're going to want to know to make sure that they can steer the ship the direction they need to go in? So get that lingo down, get comfortable with the business environment.
These are really great points, Lindsey. Thank you so much. I guess with also data, we're recognizing, we do a lot of data cleaning. I know Mansi's mentioned quite a lot, and recognizing company is that a data lake, data warehouse. I think the new one is data swamp. Doing like APIs, but yeah, it's also storytelling the data, recognizing, how do we tell the story, not just show a lot of like pretty charts on the screen, right? So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Nayeon to answering the Python questions.
Okay, so should I talk about like the track in general?
No, just like data structures, algorithm, Python tips, just
okay.
like preparing like for Python questions. Like Python is everywhere.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
hard to say just this one little thing. It's like it's everywhere. So I guess how would you do that, like preparing for an
Oh,
interview?
okay. Yeah, I think to prepare for an interview with Python, I would definitely like brush up on the basic Python's like built-in methods because but for but like sometimes like you don't really like need to remember like everything about Python, especially like in terms of syntax. But still it's good to like show that you have a strong grasp of the language if you all remember like the methods and functions that you want to use. And but Python comes with like very useful libraries like collections libraries and also like priority queue libraries and heap queue libraries. So you can definitely look up like the Python library documentation to see like what other like features are provided, and you can like incorporate that into your Python code when you need to write a solution. Because Python, like if you leverage Python's like awesome abilities, then you can like make your code a lot more succinct. And I think like personally, I try to write very Pythonic code because I really like vibe with Python's like philosophy, and I love how Python lets us like make our code like cleaner. So if you like, for example, if you leverage like Python's like list comprehension, or like if you can explain like what a generator is in Python, or even like a small detail like for example, we have like the sort method for list, but you cannot call that but we have like sorted method that takes in on iterable and returns the sorted version as a list. So if you understand like the difference, and if you show that like you have a good understanding of what like Python's API and what Python is like Python like provides, then you can show that like you're a good candidate who's also a good Python programmer.
That's great. And I guess I'll also add a note. Jessica Kubi, who's our Python track evangelist, she posts all the trivia Tuesdays. I was mentioning like find out what like version of Python the company is using. Sometimes they're using a much older version than what's available out, because you just want to have like backwards compatibility. You don't want like software to crash, and it takes a while, right, to make sure everything's updated for like the newer versions. But there's always a lot of like great documentation you can read about online. Yeah, did you also maybe want to mention Nayeon about the what's it called, like leak code mock interview, or
Yeah,
how like to solve
definitely.
problem? And also I think my last is like how to solve like when you just don't know how to solve that problem.
Yes, definitely. So the most useful resources for practicing for technical interviews are, I think, LeetCode and Pramp. So LeetCode is an online judge where you can solve problems, and where you can like see if your solutions are correct. Like there are a bunch of test cases you need to pass to actually like solve a problem. And by practicing problems on LeetCode, there's also like a discussion forum where people talk about their own solutions, and they also talk about like the complexity analysis. Then you can like learn like what other solutions are there, and maybe like their own coding styles as well, if you find that helpful. And in terms of like mock interviews, I think it's always a good idea to conduct as many mock interviews as possible, because for me, I have like really bad interview anxiety, and I almost like on the verge of panic right before an interview. So just by practicing dealing with like the interview anxiety by conducting mock interviews, maybe like with your friends or like colleagues, preparing for like job interviews as well. Or even there's this website called Pramp, Pramp, which is, just to make clear, it is not an advertisement. It is free, and you can do like mock interviews with strangers. So by practicing solving problems on these two platforms, and you can enhance your data structures and algorithms knowledge. And also you can be a better interviewee. And by becoming a better interviewee, I mean that like you need to show that like you're a collaborative problem solver, because the purpose of conducting an interview is not to just test your coding skills or just like measure the hard skills. It's also to see like if you're like a likable person, if you are pleasant to work with. So you need to like show that you need to be engaging with the interview. You need to ask questions. You need to kind of like collaborate with your interviewer to solve the problems. And if there's this pattern I always use in technical interviews, which is called umpire, credits to this organization called CodePath. So umpire stands for understand, and M, I think it is match. So first understand, you need to understand the problem. You can try to like paraphrase, like you can try to repeat what the question is to really like check that you're understanding the problem, because we first need to properly understand the problem before we jump into coding. And then you need to match. So by match, what I mean is that there are some common patterns used to solve data structured and algorithmic problems. So you need to like think about if you have seen like a similar problem, or what kind of like patterns or techniques you know to solve this problem. And then umpire. So P, umpire. I'm trying to remember what P stands for, but I don't like remember it off the top of my head. But basically the next format is that after you clarify like your understanding, you need to like ask questions to the interviewer to check like some edge cases, or to check like some constraints, and also to state your assumption. Because like, for example, if you're given a list of integers, the list can be empty or the list can be just like none in Python, right? So you need to ask interviewers good questions, and then you can briefly discuss the high level approach to solving the problem. And then you can also like talk about other possible solutions, even if it is a brute force solution, to show that you have a good understanding of engineering trade-offs. Like if you want to optimize for time complexity, then we oftentimes need to sacrifice space complexity. So by measuring like the complexities of other solutions, you can justify why you would code up this solution, this particular solution, because compared to other solutions, this is better in this way. And then you can jump into coding. And then after that, you need to do a dry run, because like, so personally, when I finish coding, I often cannot stop my urge to just like directly execute my code, because I want to see like what the result is. But in an interview setting, oftentimes you would code in a plain text editor, or even if it's like an IDE, you will not be able to execute in most cases. So you want to like make sure what each line is. You want to make sure to check what each line is doing. And then if you find yourself like a mistake you have done before, that if you made in the code, then just like mentioning, oh, I made this mistake, but if we run this kind of test case, then it'll fail on this line. Then it shows that like you can detect your errors on your own. And also you can ask for like feedback directly. Like if you find yourself like really lost, then you can ask, oh, I'm thinking this way, but I'm not sure how I can do this particular task. Then by asking this kind of question, you're kind of like encouraging the interviewer to help you. And also you're showing that you are willing to collaborate with your interviewer.
So great points. Thank you so much, Nayeon. So I also want to add, post in chat, I found the umpire: understand, match, plan, implement, review, and evaluate. And two other questions I'd like to ask you, like when they ask like, oh, you solved this problem, I'm like, you know, is this a problem that happened before? Because sometimes it's a very shocking problem, or it's just for the sake of the interview, right? You want to like, how do you solve that? How do you see? How do you think? And also like, how do you explain things to someone who may be non-technical? Right? How do you explain to the sales team and stakeholders that if you do this, like and prioritize like these tasks, they may take longer, and it's like, you know, it's going to like lag like in the code or so on. But yeah, and then I guess it's kind of over if you're preparing for SQL questions, and then after that we'll wrap up the event.
Yes, for SQL questions, I can suggest, for example, if you don't have experience with SQL, imagine if you are using a Excel document or a spreadsheet and you need to filter some rows. So it's similar using some basic commands. Your interviewer say, okay, this is the test. I need to share, you need to share your screen, write a basic query to select the top countries in this database, for example. For practice SQL, it's important to use the basic commands, for example, the select, the where, group by, having by, but it's a terminology called query optimizations. I'm going to share them the link, but query optimizations is very important when you do some queries in the practice, because sometimes you will to work with a small data, but if you work in data science, you work with big data. So when you try to do the same query, you can probably take you 1 hour or some minutes to have your output. The interviewer could say, okay, your query is okay, but how can reduce the time to have that output? So recommend you to explore more how can optimize your query, have the best practice for that, and try to explore different databases to practice that. You can use Kaggle, for example, to download your database using, for example, MySQL, or for practice is LeetCode is a good resource. Hackenrun also. You can find different resources in internet, but basically try to practice with imagine that like that in the test you need to filter and also have the exactly the results that the interviewer need to have. It's not when you practice some problems with code, it's not a unique solution. You can find different solutions, different routes for that. So don't be afraid to try if you have the logical, or you have some I don't know, you can imagine, okay, I think that this my logic is that I can use joins or select with distance. I don't know. This is the kind of question for SQL. I think that's all, but it's important to also need check the data sets, learn more about the types of formats for data sets, because you can find not one table. You can find 2 tables, and the interviewer say, okay, how can you have relationship with the primary key or the foreign key for the other. So yes, this is the important tips for that kind of questions.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Yes, we should not do a drop table. Find out how often they're running backups. Also, like aware, I think now with like a lot of remote interviews, like they do pair programming, right? You're working with someone who actually is coding with you, who'll be like a teammate. I'm not sure if still in person they do whiteboarding interviews. But it's like they say, they want to see how you think to solve the problem. Obviously, we're all enthusiastic to just like, jump in and start solving, but it's fair just to ask questions so we can like plan and like see how much time it takes like to solve that coding question. And maybe we're lucky, it's something a previous project, something similar we worked on that we have a lot of knowledge about. So yeah, I think that's it. Looking at the open source insight, I think that's probably like a wish list topic we may have to cover at the next session. Yeah, so I'll wrap up our event. Thank you so much, Lindsey, Mansi, Aranyah, Victoria, Nayeon, Bisi, for speaking. And I know with the current climate, like everyone's looking for a job, and like we're keeping our skills like sharp, we're keeping ourselves busy and like today, and like helping supporting like the community. So really grateful to have you share your time, energy, and like your knowledge like on these as person who's like interviewing or person like hiring. Like we appreciate it so much. Yeah, welcome, Nayeon. So any other points, Mansi, you want to discuss that Women Who Code is doing? I know we celebrated Women's Day 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We keep having because they're popular, we keep having resume booster and career series and workshops, 2 of which playlists have posted in the chat as well. And I'll suggest everyone, like encourage everyone to join the Slack communities, because that's where most of the action is. So you get to know about track events, and I have gotten to know about a lot of opportunities because of Women Who Code Slack. Because like it's a good networking place. Also, you can find us there, you can reach out to us, and definitely, yeah, please hit us up if you have any questions or just want to say hi after the event.
So if you want to like post some thank you to the speakers in the chat. Otherwise, say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and I hope everyone has an awesome weekend. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Happy Friday.